So we are discussing kingdom fungi. Some of the characters we already discussed. So now coming to the other characteristic features of the fungi. So here the fungi are saprophytes. Most of the fungi are saprophytes or parasites. So they are either saprophytes or parasites. So what are saprophytes? Saprophytes are the organisms. They depend on dead and decaying organic matter for their food. They are called as saprophytes. So some of the fungi are saprophytes and some of the fungi are parasites. So what are parasites? So parasites are the organisms that depend on other living plants and animals. Here saprophytes depend on dead and decaying organisms. Parasites depend on living organisms. So fungi can live either parasites or saprophytes. They also live as symbionts. Fungi also live as symbionts. So here the fungi can show the symbiotic association with other organisms. So in symbiotic association, the two organisms can live together. Here the two organisms can be benefited from each other. That is called symbiotic association. So the fungi also live as symbionts. So with which organisms they can live as symbionts? So some of the fungi can live with algae. So fungi can live with algae called lichens. So some of the fungi can live along with the algae. So fungi in association with algae usually called lichens, and some of the fungi can show symbiotic association with roots of higher plants. It is called mycorrhiza. So mycorrhiza. So what is mycorrhiza? Fungi along with roots of higher plants. Fungi can live or fungi can show symbiotic association with the roots of higher plants is called mycorrhiza. And lichens, fungi along with algae can form the lichens. Lichens are the best indicators of pollution. So wherever the soil is polluted, lichens cannot grow. Anyway, we are going to discuss these lichens in detail in the further classes. So the fungi can live as saprophytes or parasites or symbionts. So next, coming to the reproduction in fungi. Coming to the reproduction, fungal reproduction. So in order to continue for further generation, the organisms can undergo reproduction process. So the fungi can reproduce mainly by three means. So the fungi undergoes reproduction by mainly three processes. So vegetative reproduction, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. So fungi reproduces mainly by three methods. So the fungi undergoes reproduction mainly by three methods, that is vegetative reproduction, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. So how it can reproduce by vegetatively? First, coming to the vegetative reproduction. So the fungi can reproduce vegetatively by fragmentation, fission, budding. There is a three. Again, the fungi can reproduce mainly by three methods: vegetative reproduction, asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction. Again, the vegetative reproduction is of three types. The fungi can reproduce vegetatively by three methods. They are fragmentation, fission and budding. So first, coming to the fragmentation, you know that the organism here, it can divide it into fragments. Each fragment can develop into new organism. That is called fragmentation. Fission is nothing but division. One organism can be divided into two. That is called division. Next, budding. Yeast can reproduce by budding. For example, this is the yeast cell. It it can form the budding like this. Later, the bud can be separated from the main cell. That bud can be developed into big cell. So that is called budding here. So vegetative reproduction mainly takes place by three methods: fragmentation, fission and budding. Now coming to the asexual reproduction. The fungi also reproduce asexually by forming different types of spores. In asexual reproduction, the sex organs are not involved. Gametes are not formed during sexual reproduction and vegetative reproduction. So in asexual reproduction, asexual reproduction in fungi takes place by the formation of 4 different types of spores, either aplanospores, conidiospores, sporangiospores or zoospores. So these are the 4 different types of spores. Not all 4 spores are formed in single organism. The organism can produce either aplanospores or sporangiospores or conidiospores or zoospores. So what are the 4 different types of asexual spores which are formed in fungi, fungal reproduction? Aplanospores, conidiospores, sporangiospores and zoospores. So these are the 4 different types of spores, asexual spores, which are formed during asexual reproduction of fungi. Now coming to the sexual reproduction. Here in during sexual reproduction also spores are formed, but the type of spores here are different. So here also 4 different types of sexual spores which are formed. Not all 4 sexual spores are formed in single fungi. Either one of the type of the sexual spores is formed in one particular fungi. So what are the different types of sexual spores produced by the fungi during sexual reproduction process? They are ascospores, basidiospores, oospores, zygospores. Now these are very important. Please don't be confused with the asexual spores and sexual spores. They may ask, they will give any 4 options and ask what is the sexual spore. So ascospores, zoospores, aplanospores, conidiospores they have given. So ascospores comes under sexual spores, like that. So asexual reproduction takes place by aplanospores, conidiospores, sporangiospores or zoospores. During sexual reproduction, ascospores are formed or basidiospores are formed or oospores are formed or zygospores are formed. Any one of the spores can be formed during sexual reproduction. And one more thing here, you should remember, the sexual reproduction in lower organisms, especially in fungi, is quite different from that of the higher organisms. First, we are going to discuss about how the sexual reproduction takes place in the higher organisms. Then we can compare with the lower organisms like fungi. So normally in case of higher organisms, like you can take higher plants or animals or human beings, you can take how the sexual reproduction takes place. Here, the male organism can produce the male gamete. Here male gamete. The female organism can produce the female gamete. Right? The male gamete can be fused with the female gamete. The male sex organ, I am talking about the reproduction in higher organisms. The male organism can produce the male gamete. That is, male sex organ can produce the male gamete, and the female sex organ in the female organism can produce the female gamete. The male gamete can be fused with the female gamete, and here the male organism can produce the sperm cell. Female organism can produce the ovum or egg. Here the male gamete or the sperm can be fused with the female gamete or ovum, results in the formation of zygote. Here the male gamete is haploid, female gamete is also haploid, which contains only one set of chromosomes. That is, if we take Here, the male gamete can be fused with the female gamete, results in the formation of zygote. Zygote is diploid, 2n. This zygote develops into embryo. Embryo develops into fetus or organism, which develops into organism. This takes place in case of higher organism. How this male gamete and the female gamete can be produced from the male and female organism? By the process of meiosis. Understand? This is the whole thing, that reproduction that takes place in the higher organisms. Understand? Here first meiosis takes place, later zygote is formed, zygote can be developed into new organism. Zygote can be developed into new organism. This takes place in case of higher organisms. Then how the sexual reproduction that takes place in fungi? So if you observe the reproduction in fungi, here first meiosis does not take place. Here the fungi itself is haploid. So two haploid fungi can come in contact with each other like this, and here the nucleus and protoplasm will be there. First the protoplasm can be fused here, that is called plasmogamy. First what happens here? Plasmogamy takes place. Here this is one fungal hyphae, this is another fungal hyphae. Whenever the two compatible hyphae come in contact with each other, the nucleus and the protoplasm that is present in the hyphae can be fused. First what happens? Nucleus cannot be fused. First what happens? The protoplasm present in the two hyphae can be fused like this. Then what happens? Can form like this. Can form like this. Nucleus will be there and protoplasm will be fused. Understand? That is called plasmogamy. Next what happens? Karyogamy takes place. What is plasmogamy here? Plasmogamy is nothing but the fusion of protoplasm of the two hyphae, two compatible hyphae from the male and female gametes. Here nucleus will be there, protoplasm is fused, that is called plasmogamy. So first plasmogamy takes place. We are discussing reproduction in fungi. So whenever the two haploid hyphae or the two gametes come in contact with each other, the protoplasm present in the two gametes can be fused. That is called plasmogamy. Gamy means fusion, plasma means protoplasm can be fused. Next, karyogamy takes place. What is karyogamy? Karyo means nucleus, gamy means fusion, fusion of nucleus. Only protoplasm is fused, nucleus cannot be fused in the first step. Next what happens? The nucleus can be fused. The two nucleus can be fused and becomes the big nucleus here. Now it develops into zygote. Whenever the two haploid nuclei come in contact with each other, which forms the diploid zygote. Please remember, the nucleus here is haploid, N. Here also N. N. Here it is 2N. The two haploid nuclei can be fused and forms the diploid zygote. That zygote undergoes meiosis. This zygote undergoes meiosis and produce the two haploid hyphae again like this. Understand? This is how the reproduction that takes place in the fungi. Here what happens? First, here the cells are diploid. Initially the cells are diploid. Here the initially cells are haploid. So the diploid cells undergoes meiosis. The reproductive cells undergoes meiosis. Diploid reproductive cells undergoes meiosis and forms the gametes, male and female gamete. The fusion of the male and female gamete results in the formation of zygote. Zygote develops into embryo, embryo develops into organism. This is in case of higher organisms, not in fungi. Please remember. Now, how the reproduction takes place in fungi? Here the two haploid gametes or the two haploid hyphae come in contact with each other. The protoplasm present in the two cells will be fused. The fusion of protoplasm is called plasmogamy. Once the plasmogamy is completed, next it will enter into the karyogamy. Here the two nuclei will be fused. The fusion of two nuclei is called karyogamy. Once the karyogamy is completed, what happens? Diploid zygote will be formed. The zygote undergoes meiosis. Once the zygote undergoes meiosis, again it produces the two haploid hyphae. This is how the reproduction that takes place in fungi. And here you should remember two things here. Whenever the two compatible hyphae come in contact with each other, first plasmogamy takes place, next karyogamy. In some fungi what happens? Soon after the plasmogamy, karyogamy will take place. The two protoplasm present in the two hyphae will be fused as soon as the plasmogamy completed. The protoplasm will be fused, later nucleus will be fused. Nucleus develops into zygote, zygote undergoes meiosis and produces the haploid hyphae. Each and every step takes place very fastly, it takes place continuously in some fungi, but in some other fungi how the reproduction takes place, very important. In some other fungi how the reproduction takes place means the two haploid hyphae come in contact with each other, the protoplasm will be fused, the first step will be completed. Next what happens, karyogamy should take place. In some fungi, karyogamy does not take place soon after plasmogamy, which means the cell consists of two nuclei, that is called dikaryon. Di means two, karyon means nucleus. Two nuclei will be present in single cell. Why you are calling it a single cell? Here the two cells are there actually. Once the two cells will be fused, the cross walls between the two cells will be fused. So now it becomes the one cell. So one cell consists of two nuclei. That's why it's called dikaryon. Intervening dikaryotic stage or dikaryotic phase is observed in some fungi. Example, ascomycetes and basidiomycetes. They are one of the group of the fungi that we are going to discuss in the next session. So that is called dikaryon. Later the nuclei will be fused. Next the nucleus undergoes fused and forms the zygote. Next the zygote undergoes meiosis. That parental cell here divides and produces the two haploids. So this is how the reproduction takes place. So once again, here the reproduction in fungi takes place by three methods: vegetative reproduction, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Vegetative reproduction takes place by fragmentation, fission, budding. Asexual reproduction takes place by aplanospores, conidiospores, sporangiospores and zoospores. Sexual reproduction takes place by ascospores, basidiospores, oospores and zygospores. Please don't be confused with zygospores and zoospores. Zygospores are sexual spores, zoospores are asexual spores. Now coming to the sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction in fungi mainly takes place by three phases: plasmogamy, karyogamy and meiosis. First plasmogamy takes place, next karyogamy takes place, next meiosis takes place. Plasmogamy is nothing but fusion of protoplasm of the two haploid hyphae is called plasmogamy. Karyogamy is nothing but fusion of nuclei is called karyogamy. And meiosis. Once the karyogamy is completed, in some fungi what happens, the two nuclei will be fused soon after plasmogamy, but in some other fungi the nuclei cannot be fused. It will be like this. In some fungi the two nuclei will be fused and forms this structure directly. In some fungi the second phase, two nuclei will be present in single cell, that is called intervening or intermediate dikaryotic stage is observed. So after some time the nuclei will be fused. In both cases the nuclei will be fused. In first case the nuclei will be fused soon after plasmogamy. In some other cases, in some other fungi, karyogamy does not take place soon after plasmogamy. After some time karyogamy takes place. It will take some time. Okay, so that stage is called dikaryotic stage. Why? Two nuclei will be present in the one cell, that's called dikaryon or dikaryotic phase. Next, once the dikaryotic phase is over, the two nuclei will be fused, it forms the zygote which is diploid. Zygote undergoes meiosis and produces the two haploid cells. This is again, the two haploid hyphae will come in contact with each other, again same process. Fungi will be produced like this, the life cycle will be going on. The sexual life cycle will be going on in case of fungi like this. So this is about the reproduction in fungi.